agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Forrest.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to speak on this particular bill. As we know, the Coalition in government passed legislation to enable the development of offshore electricity infrastructure through the Offshore Electricity Infrastructure Bill of 2021, which provided a robust framework, particularly in Commonwealth waters, for this type of development. Now, the majority of this bill has our support. However, to improve the bill even further, I support the amendments moved by the Shadow Minister, the member for Fairfax, in this space. Now, there is a proposal for a particular offshore wind farm in my electorate, off Bunbury and throughout the southwest along Binningup. In looking at this at a presentation recently, it's apparently around 5.5 kilometres in currently looking at starting in state waters, and it's a near-shore construction. It will expand into Commonwealth waters over time, and the proposal is for 111 turbines, 15 in state waters and 96 in Commonwealth, producing 1.8 gigawatts of power. Now, construction is expected to take place between 2028 and 2030, and this wind farm operational from 2031. Now, as we know, not sure of exactly the height of the turbines, but we know that now, according to NOPSEMA information, they started off at a particular height and now can be built at up to 250 metres. And I understand the company stated that it has 10 offshore wind projects fully approved, ready to go. And as I know from talking to my colleagues, it's really important that we have the right location for offshore and onshore wind turbines and wind farms. And we've seen some very successful ones of those in the member for Grey's electorate and also in Tasmania. But one of the important parts of this is to really consider the whole-of-life management of the infrastructure, from the logistics, the construction, the maintenance, issues around corrosion and potential collision with vessels, the particular impact on bird life, the issue of fires, mechanical and electrical equipment failure, and potential wind damage. Now, the lifespan of wind turbines ranges from 10, 15 to around 20-year lifespans. So the removal, the recycling, the decommissioning of these is also an issue to be considered at this point, which is what we really want to see throughout this legislation. And in particular, the financial arrangements for licence holders to guarantee the dollars are there for not just the maintenance, but the removal and the recycling. I also am particularly focused on local procurement that might go with this in my electorate. In some instances, I'm aware that there are, in certain areas, where the same crew is used to simply service various wind farms just on rotation, and it may not involve locals. The presentation that I saw recently, in spite of what's been said, once these wind turbines are in place, whether onshore or offshore, and the same with solar panel farms, there are actually very few jobs locally available once they're operational. We see in this legislation that there is a change so that the minister has discretion around the decisions around the financial side of this for the proponents. And certainly robust guarantees need to be in place, whether it's by way of a banknote or a letter of credit. Needs to be an enduring arrangement so that at the end of life of the actual piece of infrastructure, that the actual dollars are there, financed by those who actually built and benefited from this particular infrastructure. I'm also concerned about the national security and sovereignty issues. When I look at the fact that at this time at least 80% of solar panels are produced in China, and that's moving towards 95%. And in the turbine space, China is a major supplier. And some of the information I've received as well around the recycling capability, certainly the turbines that came out of Germany had a higher recycling capability than others. So when you consider the 10, 15 or 20-year timeframes, these are all practical matters that need to be dealt with when these sorts of projects are on the table. I recently saw at the Energy and Climate Summit the need, as we've heard repeatedly, for 47 megawatt wind turbines to be built every month to 2030. So it will be a significant task to manage these and to recycle them over time. And as we know, they could be up to 250 metres high. At the same time, we will need to see 22,500 watt solar panels installed every day, and that's 60 million by the end of the decade. And so NOPSEMA information really talks about how the location of any of whether it's solar or whether it's wind onshore or offshore, the importance of the closeness and proximity to the markets where the demand is, and we know that to be often either industrial or city-based, because that's where the demand is. But in rural and regional areas, we're now seeing the impacts of this, and the most important thing will be the social licence, the community consultation process, and real concerns around the changes in this bill that give the Minister the financial security of the licence holders sitting with him and not with the regulator. There is concern that rural, regional and sometimes more remote communities could be steamrolled in this process. We also know of the 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines that will be required onshore, this is a significant impact on rural, regional and potentially more remote communities. The other issue around the new solar farms is, you know, I'm unashamedly a farmer, Mr Deputy Speaker, and there is some significant areas where it is the right place for onshore. There is also the wrong place for onshore wind farms and solar panels. And we know that the sheer size of the area that will be required for both will be significant, which is why I also support the amendments very strongly proposed by the member for Fairfax, the Shadow Minister. Given the ministerial control over the financial arrangements, it's really important that the regional communities are not steamrolled, and that with the installation required here, that they are well consulted and certainly a part of the discussion from day one. And that is a particular part of the amendment that I am very supportive of. That social licence is so critical, and in rural, regional and remote areas, very, very important. It's not okay to say you will just take this whether you like it or not in that space. There is a real need to engage with the community along the way. And I think the issue of the product stewardship, no matter how, the whole of life of these particular pieces of infrastructure is really important. But I am very committed to maximising local procurement, again covered in the amendments. It's important that wherever these, whether it's onshore or offshore, wherever they're located, that the local communities are actually benefiting. The local businesses, the small businesses engaged in this, are actually beneficiaries in this space. And there is a real need for real transparency around each financial security deal approved by the Minister, no question. The community needs to have confidence in that process, that at the end of life for that infrastructure, that there are arrangements in place, well, not only for the ongoing servicing and maintenance, but for the removal and for the recycling, that is in place from day one, to give confidence to the community that they won't be left with assets that are no longer working and there's no funding there to support that work. We really saw last night in the budget a potential increase of 50% in energy bills and 40% increase in gas bills to 2023. What we certainly need is a managed transition as we move through, and it's something that we It's the government's job to manage the transition because there is a need for affordable, reliable and dispatchable power. And we saw electricity prices under the coalition falling by 10% for households and small businesses and 12% for industry. And we did see, in spite of what's been said, $40 billion that had been invested in renewables since 2017. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, in supporting the legislation, but in supporting the further amendments to improve this bill and improve the outcome, as I say, it's really important to rural and regional communities that they are part of this process and can have confidence not only in their dealings with the actual companies, but in the whole of life management of these particular assets and this infrastructure. And one clear way of doing that is to ensure the financial security side of it and to have clarity over that, but also the social licence to operate in those communities is particularly critical. And there is a real need for our communities to be engaged early and not to be steamrolled in this process, but equally that there is a benefit in those small communities with the production not only of this electricity, but in the management of the process throughout its lifespan, whether that's 10, 15 or 20 years, and that appropriate management, recycling is part of that. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.